What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses faces questions she never agreed to answer? The tension in the CBS Morning Show studio was palpable from the moment Jennifer Aniston sat down across from Gayle King. What started as a routine promotional interview quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable moments in morning television history. Before we dive into exactly what went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about celebrity interviews crossing the line. The interview began innocently enough. Gayle King welcomed Jennifer with her signature warm smile, and the actress settled into her chair with the practiced ease of someone who had done thousands of these appearances. They were supposed to be discussing Jennifer's new film, a romantic comedy that had been generating positive buzz in early screenings. The first few minutes proceeded exactly as expected. So Jennifer, this new film really showcases a different side of your comedy. Gayle opened, her tone friendly and conversational. Tell us what drew you to this role. Jennifer leaned forward slightly, her expression animated as she began discussing her character. You know, what I loved about this script was that it didn't treat the female lead as just a punchline. She's funny, yes, but she's also flawed and real and making genuine mistakes. That's the kind of comedy I'm drawn to now, stories that have heart beneath the humor. Gayle nodded along, appearing engaged. You've been in this industry for over 3 decades now. How do you think comedy has evolved during your career? Oh, enormously, Jennifer replied. When I started out, women in comedy were often relegated to very specific types. The neurotic one, the ditzy one, the uptight one. Now we're seeing female characters who are allowed to be complex and contradictory, which is so much more interesting to play. The conversation continued smoothly through discussions of working with her co-stars, the filming locations, and a few lighthearted anecdotes from the set. Jennifer seemed relaxed, laughing at the right moments, giving thoughtful answers. The studio audience was clearly enjoying the exchange. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Then Gayle shifted in her seat, and something in her demeanor changed. Her smile remained, but there was a new quality to it, something more probing. Jennifer, I want to shift gears a little bit, if that's okay, Gayle said, her voice still maintaining that friendly tone, but with an edge of seriousness creeping in. You've been very private about your personal life over the years, which everyone respects. But there's been a lot of conversation lately in the media about aging in Hollywood, particularly for women. You're 55 now, and you look incredible. Can we talk about the pressure that comes with that? Jennifer's expression flickered, just for a moment. Those watching closely might have noticed her jaw tighten slightly. Thank you, that's very kind. I think the pressure exists, sure, but I try not to give it too much power in my life. I focus on my health, on feeling good, on doing work that fulfills me. Right, absolutely, Gayle continued. But there's been speculation, and I want to give you the chance to address this directly. There are constant rumors about procedures, about what you've had done, what you haven't had done. Do you think there's a way for women in your position to age naturally in this industry, or is that just not realistic? The shift in Jennifer's body language was immediate. Her shoulders squared, and her smile became fixed. I'm sorry, Gayle, but I thought we were here to discuss the film. This wasn't part of what we discussed beforehand. I understand, Gayle said smoothly, not backing down. But these are questions that your fans are genuinely curious about. You're a role model to so many women. Don't you think having this conversation could be valuable? I think what would be valuable, Jennifer said, her voice taking on a harder edge while still maintaining composure, is focusing on the work rather than constantly reducing actresses to their appearance. I've been doing this for 30 years, and we're still having the same conversation. When was the last time you asked a male actor about his procedures? That's fair, Gayle acknowledged, but she didn't pivot away. But the reality is that the standards are different, and you're someone who's managed to maintain a certain image. Women watching want to know how achievable that is. Is it genetics? Is it work? What's the truth? Jennifer's eyes narrowed slightly. The truth is that I take care of myself. I work out. I try to eat well. I have good skin care. And honestly, Gayle, even if I had done every procedure under the sun, I wouldn't owe anyone an explanation about my personal medical choices. The temperature in the studio seemed to drop. The audience had gone quiet. Gayle, to her credit or perhaps her detriment, pressed forward. Of course you don't owe anyone anything, she said, but you're a public figure who's built a career partially on your image. Is it dishonest to not acknowledge when that image is maintained through means beyond what the average woman can achieve? Dishonest? Jennifer repeated, and now there was no mistaking the ice in her voice. I'm an actress. I've never claimed to be anything other than that. I've never sold skincare products claiming they're the secret to looking young. I've never pretended that I don't have access to resources that most people don't. What exactly am I being dishonest about? I'm not attacking you, Gayle said, though her persistence suggested otherwise. I'm asking questions that illuminate a larger conversation about beauty standards and authenticity in Hollywood. By putting me on the spot on live television, Jennifer shot back. This is what we're calling journalism now? Ambushing your guests with questions they explicitly said were off limits? A murmur went through the audience. This was clearly escalating beyond typical morning show fare. Gayle's co-hosts, seated further down the curved desk, exchanged uncomfortable glances but remained silent. I wouldn't call this an ambush, Gayle defended. These are relevant questions, given your public profile and the ongoing cultural conversation. Cultural conversation, Jennifer said with a bitter laugh. That's a nice way of dressing up gossip and invasion of privacy. You know what the real conversation should be? Why we're still doing this to women. Why my male co-star in this film isn't sitting here being interrogated about his hairline, or his weight, or whether his jaw looks different than it did 20 years ago. He's also not the main draw of the publicity tour, Gayle countered. You're the star. People are interested in you. Interested in my work, I would hope, Jennifer said sharply, but apparently that's too much to expect. Even now, even after everything that's changed in this industry, we still can't get through an interview without making it about a woman's appearance. The tension was thick enough to cut. Gayle seemed to recognize she was losing control of the interview, but wasn't quite ready to concede the point. Jennifer, I hear what you're saying, Gayle responded, her tone attempting to sound conciliatory while her eyes remained sharp and focused. But let's be honest about something. You've been on magazine covers. You've done beauty campaigns. You've been celebrated for how you look. You've benefited from the very system you're now criticizing. Isn't that a bit hypocritical? The word hung in the air like a grenade. Jennifer's face flushed, and for a moment, she seemed to be gathering herself, deciding how to respond. When she spoke, her voice was controlled but trembling with barely contained anger. Hypocritical, she repeated slowly. Because I've worked as an actress in an industry that has certain expectations, I'm now a hypocrite for pointing out that those expectations are problematic? That's quite a logical leap, Gayle. I'm saying there's a contradiction, Gayle pressed. You participate in the beauty industry. You accept roles that trade on your appearance, but then you don't want to talk about it. You can't have it both ways. Actually, I can, Jennifer said firmly. I can do my job, which sometimes involves looking a certain way for a role, and still maintain boundaries about my personal life and my personal choices. Those aren't contradictory positions. What's contradictory is claiming you're a serious journalist while spending your airtime grilling someone about whether or not they've had work done. Gayle's smile had become strained. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, cultural icons. I think I've established my credentials as a serious journalist. Then act like one, Jennifer said bluntly. Ask me about the themes in the film. Ask me about the director's vision. Ask me about working with the ensemble cast. Ask me about comedy as a craft. Ask me, literally, anything of substance, instead of this TMZ-level interrogation. The public wants to know, Gayle insisted, falling back on what seemed to be her core justification. You're a public figure. This comes with the territory. Does it? Jennifer challenged. Because I don't remember signing a contract that said I had to discuss my medical history on morning television. I don't remember agreeing that my body and my face were public property to be dissected and analyzed. I came here to promote a film. That was the agreement. You've completely abandoned that. One of Gayle's co-hosts, clearly sensing the interview spiraling out of control, attempted to interject. Maybe we could talk about the film's message, about second chances in love? But Gayle wasn't ready to let go. She turned back to Jennifer, ignoring her colleague's attempt at redirection. Jennifer, you've spoken out about body positivity and women supporting women. How is refusing to have an honest conversation about beauty standards supporting women? Aren't you perpetuating the very silence that makes other women feel inadequate? Jennifer's eyes widened in disbelief. Are you seriously trying to frame this as me not supporting women? That's incredible. Truly incredible. You ambush me with questions I explicitly said I wouldn't answer. You ignore my boundaries. You dismiss my attempts to redirect to the actual purpose of this interview. And now you're suggesting that I'm the one letting women down? I'm suggesting that transparency could be powerful, Gayle said. That's all. No, that's not all, Jennifer countered, her voice rising slightly. What you're doing is trying to justify invasive questioning by wrapping it in the language of empowerment. It's manipulative, Gayle. You're essentially saying that if I don't answer your inappropriate questions, I'm betraying other women. That's not journalism, that's entrapment. The audience was completely silent now, riveted by the confrontation unfolding before them. This was clearly not what anyone had expected from a Tuesday morning talk show appearance. I think you're being overly sensitive, Gayle said, and the words seemed to land like a match on gasoline. Overly sensitive, Jennifer repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. There it is, the classic dismissal. A woman sets a boundary and she's being overly sensitive. A woman refuses to play along with an agenda she didn't agree to, and she's being difficult. Tell me, Gayle, would you say the same thing to a male guest who called you out for ambushing him? This isn't about gender, Gayle protested. Everything about this is about gender, Jennifer fired back. That's exactly the point I've been trying to make. You think you can ask me these questions because I'm a woman in Hollywood, and somehow that makes my privacy less important, my boundaries less valid. You wouldn't dream of asking Tom Hanks or George Clooney about their procedures. You wouldn't dare ask Brad Pitt to detail his skincare routine and then call him hypocritical if he declined. Those men haven't built their careers the same way you have, Gayle argued, and it was clear she immediately regretted the phrasing. Excuse me? Jennifer's voice went up an octave. Haven't built their careers the same way? Please, enlighten me. How exactly have I built my career, Gayle? Because from where I'm sitting, I've spent 3 decades acting in television and film, taking on diverse roles, working with incredible talents, and yes, sometimes being on magazine covers because that's part of publicity. But apparently in your mind, that means I've built my career on my looks, and therefore owe you an explanation about my face. That's not what I meant, Gayle backtracked, but Jennifer was on a roll now. No, I think that's exactly what you meant. I think you see an actress, a woman who's been in the public eye for a long time, and you think that gives you license to treat me like I'm not a full human being with the same rights to privacy and dignity as anyone else. You think that because people have seen me on their screens, you're entitled to every detail of my life. Jennifer, we're just having a conversation, Gayle tried, her voice taking on a placating tone that only seemed to irritate Jennifer further. A conversation requires 2 willing participants, Jennifer said coldly. What we're having is an interrogation that I did not consent to. There's a significant difference. You agreed to come on the show, Gayle pointed out. I agreed to come on the show to discuss my film? Jennifer corrected sharply. I agreed to a promotional interview, not a dissection of my personal choices. You're deliberately conflating the two because it serves your purposes. Gayle shifted tactics again, her voice taking on a more personal tone. Look, I'm a woman too. I understand the pressures. I'm just trying to have an honest dialogue about something that affects all of us. Don't, Jennifer said, holding up her hand. Don't try to create false solidarity now. If you understood the pressures, you wouldn't be contributing to them. If you cared about honest dialogue, you would have had this conversation off camera. You would have respected my boundaries. You would have approached it with actual sensitivity instead of using it as a gotcha moment for ratings. That's not fair, Gayle protested. You're attributing motives to me that aren't accurate. Aren't they? Jennifer challenged. Then explain to me why you're still pushing this line of questioning when I've made it abundantly clear I'm not comfortable with it. Explain why you're more interested in controversy than content. Explain why my repeated attempts to redirect this interview have been ignored. Gayle opened her mouth to respond but seemed to struggle to find the words. The silence stretched out for several uncomfortable seconds. Finally, she said, I'm trying to ask questions that matter to our audience. Your audience tuned in to hear about a new romantic comedy, Jennifer said. I guarantee you they're getting a very different show than they expected. And you know what? Maybe that's fine. Maybe people need to see what it's like when journalists decide that a woman's appearance is more newsworthy than her work. Maybe they need to see how quickly a professional interview can turn into something invasive and uncomfortable. Are you saying I've made you uncomfortable? Gayle asked, and there was something almost challenging in her tone, as if daring Jennifer to make that accusation on camera. I'm saying you've completely disregarded professional boundaries and common courtesy, Jennifer replied. Yes, that makes me uncomfortable. It also makes me angry, disappointed, and honestly, a little sad. I expected better from you, Gayle. I've watched your interviews. I've seen you handle difficult topics with grace and intelligence. This isn't that. This is tabloid television dressed up as serious journalism. The criticism clearly stung. Gayle's expression hardened. I'm asking legitimate questions that your publicist should have anticipated would come up. My publicist provided very clear parameters for this interview, Jennifer said. You chose to ignore them. That's on you, not on anyone else. So what do you want me to do? Gayle asked, spreading her hands. Just avoid any topic that might be slightly uncomfortable? I want you to honor the agreement that was made when I accepted this booking, Jennifer said, her patience clearly wearing thin. I want you to treat me with the same respect you'd treat any other professional guest. I want you to focus on the work instead of turning this into a circus. Is that really too much to ask? Gayle leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable for a moment, before she responded, I think you're overreacting to standard interview questions. The dismissal was the final straw. Jennifer's face transformed, all pretense of politeness evaporating. Standard interview questions? You've spent the last 15 minutes trying to get me to confirm or deny cosmetic procedures. You've called me hypocritical. You've suggested I'm not supporting other women. You've questioned my integrity. And now you're telling me I'm overreacting. This is gaslighting, Gayle. On national television. That's a very serious accusation, Gayle said, her voice cooling noticeably. It's a very serious situation, Jennifer shot back. You're sitting there telling me that my perception of what just happened isn't valid, that my boundaries aren't reasonable, that my discomfort isn't justified. What would you call that? Gayle's co-host attempted to intervene again. Ladies, perhaps we should take a breath and reset here. Jennifer, why don't you tell us about the funniest moment on set? But neither woman was interested in de-escalation at this point. Jennifer kept her eyes locked on Gayle. You know what the really disappointing part is? I've defended you. When people criticized your interviews, when they said you were too tough or too aggressive, I defended you. I said that women journalists shouldn't have to soften themselves, that asking hard questions was important, but there's a difference between asking hard questions and being deliberately antagonistic. There's a difference between journalism and ambush. I conduct tough interviews, Gayle said, her professional composure cracking slightly. That's what I do. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't agree to sit down with me. Tough interviews are fine, Jennifer said, her voice rising. Interviews about difficult subjects, about controversial topics, about challenging moments in someone's career. Those are all fair game. But this isn't tough, Gayle. This is just mean. This is just invasive. You're not exposing corruption or uncovering truth. You're trying to get me to admit something about my personal medical history for entertainment value. There's nothing journalistically valuable about that. Our viewers don't think it's just entertainment, Gayle insisted. They care about authenticity. They care about whether the images they see are real or manufactured. Then have a broader conversation about the beauty industry, Jennifer countered. Bring on experts. Talk about the pressures systematically. Don't corner individual women and demand they account for their faces. That's not addressing the issue. That's participating in it. So you're saying I'm part of the problem, Gayle said flatly. Right now, yes, Jennifer said without hesitation. Absolutely you are. You're perpetuating exactly the kind of scrutiny and judgment that makes this industry toxic for women. And you're doing it while claiming some kind of moral high ground about transparency and honesty. It's hypocritical, Gayle. If we're throwing that word around, let's be accurate about who it applies to. The studio had gone so quiet you could hear the cameras adjusting focus. The crew members visible at the edges of the shot looked frozen, uncertain whether to intervene or let this play out. Gayle's voice took on an edge of frustration. I've been doing this for decades. I don't need lectures about journalism from an actress. The condescension in that sentence seemed to reverberate through the space. Jennifer's eyebrows shot up. From an actress! There it is. The real feeling comes out. You don't actually respect what I do you? This whole interview makes so much more sense now. You think because I'm an actress, I'm somehow less deserving of professional courtesy, less entitled to boundaries, less capable of having valid opinions about how I'm being treated. That's not what I said, Gayle protested, but her face suggested she knew she'd crossed a line. It's exactly what you said, Jennifer replied coldly, and it reveals everything about your attitude coming into this. You didn't see this as a conversation between two professionals. You saw it as an opportunity to extract something from someone you consider beneath you, a celebrity to be prodded and probed for content. You're twisting my words, Gayle said defensively. I'm repeating them back to you, Jennifer corrected. Maybe you don't like how they sound, but those were your words, not mine. You said you don't need lectures about journalism from an actress, as if my profession disqualifies me from having a legitimate perspective on how I'm being treated in an interview. Gayle tried to recover. I simply meant that I have extensive experience in this field. And I have extensive experience being interviewed, Jennifer said sharply. I've done thousands of interviews over 3 decades. I know what professional journalism looks like, and I know what this is. This is a hit piece disguised as a conversation. This is clickbait manufactured in real time. If you're so unhappy with how this is going, you're free to leave, Gayle said, and the challenge in her voice was unmistakable. Jennifer stared at her for a long moment. You know what, Gayle? I think I will. Because sitting here and continuing to engage with someone who has made it abundantly clear that she has no respect for me or my boundaries isn't productive for anyone. You're really going to walk out? Gayle asked, and there was something almost triumphant in her expression, as if this was the moment she'd been angling for all along. I really am, Jennifer confirmed, already reaching down to remove her microphone. Because this stopped being an interview about 10 minutes ago, and I'm not going to sit here and be your content creation at the expense of my dignity. This is very unprofessional, Gayle said, though given everything that had transpired, the accusation rang hollow. Jennifer paused in removing her mic to look directly at Gayle. You want to talk about unprofessional? Ambushing a guest with questions they said were off limits is unprofessional. Dismissing their concerns as oversensitivity is unprofessional. Condescending to them about their career is unprofessional. I'm setting a boundary. That's not unprofessional. That's self-respect. You're proving my point about celebrities not being able to handle real questions, Gayle said, and the dig was clearly intentional. Jennifer stood up, the microphone now detached and placed on the chair. No, Gayle. I'm proving that boundaries matter, that consent matters, and that journalists don't get a free pass to be cruel just because someone has been on television. You could have had a great interview today. We could have talked about comedy, about the industry, about working with an ensemble cast, about 100 interesting things. Instead, you chose this. You chose to make it ugly. That's your legacy from this conversation, not mine. The audience can decide whose legacy is damaged here, Gayle said, her voice tight. I'm sure they will, Jennifer agreed. She looked directly at the camera, speaking to the viewers at home. I'm sorry you didn't get to hear about the film. It's funny and heartfelt, and I'm really proud of it. Maybe check it out if you get a chance. With that, she turned and walked off the set. The camera stayed on Gayle, who sat in stunned silence for a moment before attempting to recover. Her co-hosts looked uncomfortable, unsure how to proceed. Gayle cleared her throat and addressed the camera directly. Well, that was certainly unexpected, she began, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. We'll take a quick break and be right back. As the show cut to commercial, the full weight of what had just happened began to settle. This wasn't just a difficult interview or a tense moment. This was a complete breakdown of the traditional celebrity interview format, broadcast live for millions to see. Jennifer Aniston, one of the most media-trained actresses in Hollywood, someone known for her professionalism and grace under pressure, had reached her limit and walked out. The interview that was supposed to promote a romantic comedy instead became a moment that sparked conversations about boundaries, respect, and what happens when a journalist pushes too far. So, what do you think? Did Jennifer make the right call walking off the set, or should she have stayed and finished the interview? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the moments when Hollywood's biggest stars reach their breaking point.